Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Bruger. Welcome to our second session on our Zero Trust presentation today. Our speaker now is Frank Urena, who's been a principal architect here at Oxford for over 4 years. Frank's assigned to some of our largest, most complex projects, as well as being a trusted advisor to our strategic customers in the healthcare, manufacturing, and other verticals. Frank has over 23 years of industry experience, starting at Ernst & Young and moving to senior director and CIO in other organizations. Frank's going to take a deeper dive today into the architectures and interactions of the Microsoft 365 security workloads and how they address the zero trust concepts focused on both identity and security. Frank, thanks for taking the time to put this presentation, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Steve. So welcome everybody to our second presentation of our future state of identity and security virtual event. And we thank you all for taking the time.
And Frank, you need to move. There you go.
There we go. So the previous talk, Sarah talked about at a high level from a strategic point of view, zero trust and how to achieve that. I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive and be talking specifically about how the Microsoft 365 security stack can help you achieve that. And so that's the title of our talk, Achieving Zero Trust and Simplifying Security with Microsoft 365 E5. Now, it does mention E5 there in the title, but we are going to talk about some other workloads that lie outside the E5 workload and integrated solution, but that are part of the entire Microsoft stack as well. Our agenda is as follows. We'll have a discussion about the best of breed versus integrated, best in class approach to security, how to streamline and strengthen your security posture with Microsoft Security in 3 key areas. First, that's consolidating your security solutions with Microsoft 365 security solutions, improving the user experience, and then therefore improving the security in your environment, and how to reduce cyber risk with integrated best-in-class security. So when it comes to defending against cyber attacks, we know we have to consider the growing complexity of the digital estate. We have to think about our assets, and we have to think about what we're trying to defend against. And this is totally different from what it was just 10 years ago. Yeah. IT organizations are stretched thin, as really they've always been, but now it's new responsibilities for protecting a crisscrossing array of web technologies and also devices that may not be owned by the organization. Those include, of course, the BYOD devices that users are bringing into the environment to access corporate data. And it could be systems and devices that are being used by partner organizations to access your information as well. With 7 billion internet-connected devices in use worldwide, not including laptops and mobile devices, you have multiple points of vulnerability for your overall estate. These advances all change the game when it comes to security. You no longer have the luxury of drawing perimeters around your organization. As was mentioned, that old paradigm of the castle and the moat just no longer apply. The data is out there, it's outside of your corporate firewalls. Your users are accessing it on their own devices, partners are accessing it. So it's important that we change with the advances, both from the attacker's point of view, but also what vendors like Microsoft can provide. With all that said, as Forrester said in a recent paper, taking all of these things together, the trends that we've outlined represent a shared challenge to IT security, and basically that the future of cybersecurity is in the cloud. And Microsoft's trusted public cloud is uniquely suited for this challenge, and that's due to its simplicity, its speed, and its scale. So a quick look at the two modalities essentially that organizations, enterprises have today when selecting security vendors. There's the best of breed approach, and that process usually looks like this. It's a process where you're gathering requirements for addressing the business need and security need in the organization. There's the RFI, RFP process that can take months, perhaps even longer. During that process, you're researching multiple products, you're having bake-offs, and proof of concepts once you've narrowed it down to perhaps 2 or 3 solutions that you may want to deploy in your environment that may address those needs and address those requirements. The positives of the best of breed approach, of course, is that any best of breed solution is going to be highly customizable, it's going to be robust, and it's going to be enterprise ready. And they may even include additional functionality that you may not need immediately, but that you can unlock in the future, and that come with the product itself without requiring you to, any additional licensing costs or other financial outlays. Because it's a single solution that's addressing a particular need, you have a higher degree of assurance that that solution will meet your business need. Deployment can be or tends to be a little bit faster than an integrated best-in-suite solution, and you may realize faster return on investment on that. And overall, you may have a better alignment with your strategy and vision. Now, of course, there are cons, as with everything. Of course, there's cost. Best of breed solutions often come with a higher price tag simply because they are in that class. They consider themselves leaders and they feel that they can charge a premium for their solution. The support teams for these products tend to be larger and require specialized knowledge and depth. We've mentioned before, there might be some additional features that you can unlock, but sometimes these features require customization, and with customization may also come the need for development. So having developers either on staff or at your disposal to unlock those additional features may be a requirement, but that of course adds to that cost. And then when it's time to upgrade or replace that solution, all those integrations and customizations will have to be reviewed and also replaced or regression tested to make sure that they continue to function as desired. There's also the something else to factor in, that's regarding multiple contracts and a complex life cycle. So if you have multiple solutions, multiple vendors, you have multiple contracts, multiple licensing contracts that have to be gone through procurement and reviewed and renewed at different times, and that can also add to the overhead and the total cost of ownership of that solution. Then there's the seams and gaps in a siloed approach. In a best of breed approach, also a siloed approach. According to the Cybersecurity and Identity Gap Survey, and I'll quote there, it says, most businesses continue to struggle with strengthening their overall cybersecurity posture because they're not aligning security measures with identity practices. And we see that quite a bit in our customers, where identity and cybersecurity are two different organizations that don't talk to each other, or identity is seen as something that just needs to be done, but no one makes it a priority. That study continued to say that 24% of large companies with more than 5,000 employees admit to being completely siloed when it comes to seeing threats, malware, network issues, and other practice areas. And the larger the org, the wider the gap that exists between identity and cybersecurity practices within that organization. And then there's the fact that there are so many vendors. I just put up here a few logos from a few of the security vendors out there. This is just a sampling, but if you've gone through the process of having to select a security solution, you know that it can be a dizzying array of vendors to select from, and that can lead to further confusion. Another thing to consider too is that best of breed, what does the future look like? Well, we know the market continues to evolve. New vendors are constantly coming on the market claiming better features, new advancements in artificial intelligence or machine learning, or whatever the new thing is. And we see that the more established, larger firms are just continually on the buying spree. Just throw up a few of the headlines from recently of some larger players just acquiring other solutions out there because they also want to move towards a integrated best in suite or best of breed platform like Google or Microsoft or Amazon are doing. So it could be that today's best of breed solution is tomorrow's integrated best in suite, but if it was from an acquisition, how well is that acquirer integrating that solution into their ecosystem? This trend, again, according to Forrester, is going to continue. There are some smaller security firms that do a really nice job, have a really good product, but they see that the competition on the horizon may be very difficult. There are just too many solutions. Enterprises are realizing that they have too many solutions in place, and they're not sure if they're getting the most out of them. And in fact, their security analysts are just overwhelmed with all of the alerts and it's essentially noise that's coming at them. Now, in contrast, an integrated platform approach, think of it as the SAP approach. SAP kind of made integration and the platform out of in the ERP space to make all of those pieces work together. And that integrated approach does have some benefits, quite a few benefits. First, you can try to leverage as much as you can from that single source. The integration of the various components is typically a little bit easier to manage, and a lot of times it's out of the box. There's not much that you need to do in order to get those different components to talk together or talk to each other. It's a common user interface for various components that may be part of the suite, so it makes the learning curve not as steep for security analysts that have to use these tools on a daily basis, and you get a consistent architecture approach. And of course, there is the reduction of the contract lifecycle complexity because you essentially have one vendor that you have to deal with. So that leads us to our next section, talking about Microsoft 365 security as an integrated platform and how it can help streamline and strengthen your security posture. There are basically three ways that the Microsoft security solution can help you within your organization. First, it can help consolidate that security portfolio and reducing the complexity and the costs, and we're going to talk a little more in depth on that. It can deliver a seamless user experience, which in turn, when you remove that friction for your users in the environment and they don't have to work around or try to work around the security blockers that may be up for them to do their jobs, you're going to have overall greater security. And thirdly, we're going to look at how the Microsoft security stack helps reduce cyber risk with integrated best-in-class protection. This slide here, I saw actually a few months ago in the blog post, and it just really struck me. It was kind of the impetus for doing this presentation, because essentially the speaker was showing how Microsoft 365 E5 in particular can help replace up to 26 other vendors or 40 different products, depending on how you look at it. I'm just going to zoom in here on this area. So these are the security solutions that Microsoft 365 E5 covers. We see a few of these: single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, access control, privileged access management, which is part of their identity governance with the PIM solution, data loss prevention. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see there are quite a few. Everything in blue here is what is currently provided within the Microsoft 365 E5 security stack. And then there are the solutions that still come from Microsoft that integrate with these other solutions that are part of that E5 stack, such as encrypted cloud storage, database security, the Sentinel for cloud-based SIEM solution, which we'll talk about a little bit later, security orchestration, automation, and response as part of the threat hunting capabilities of Sentinel, as an example, and a few others. And then there are other areas where Microsoft can integrate with third parties or through the partner ecosystem, can extend that that functionality. Taken a slightly different way, we see again from these 5 key areas in identity and access management. For instance, Azure Active Directory provides a single pane of glass for that single sign-on solution for all of your either cloud applications or homegrown applications, on-premise applications, to provide, again, that strong, single strong identity that is one of the tenets of Zero Trust. Also provides self-service password reset, and we find that whenever organizations are able to deploy self-service tools for users, you get a reduction in, again, that reducing that friction so they can just get quickly back to work if they happen to forget their password, and also a reduction in help desk calls for things like password resets. Of course, Azure Active Directory includes multi-factor authentication with its industry-leading MFA solution. But there's also the ability to do passwordless authentication, which we, of course, are encouraging organizations to start looking at. Many organizations have started down that journey of passwordless, leveraging things such as Windows Hello for Business, FIDO2, security keys, the Authenticator app as well, to achieve a truly passwordless authentication environment. Since we're going to get into a little bit, I won't go point by point, but you see that there, within the Microsoft security stack, each of these 5 key areas, identity and access management, threat protection, unified endpoint management, data protection, and cloud security, are going to be covered in one way or another by the various Microsoft security tools. Now, when looking at this, many may say, well, that's great, but what's the point in an integrated solution if the solutions themselves are not as good as the other, best of breed or best in class solutions that are out there on the market? And so I want to take a look at, since we all rely on that Gartner Magic Quadrant to kind of help us make decisions as to where a solution may lie. When I did a little research on these different solutions that Microsoft provides, and it's interesting that, for instance, if we look at the 5 key areas, so we'll look at endpoint protection first. So in endpoint protection, Microsoft is regarded as a leader, both in completeness of vision and ability to execute. So Microsoft Defender for endpoint platform is able to provide that same level of assurance as the other leaders in the market, Trend Micro, Sophos, CrowdStrike, Microsoft. Now, of course, Symantec is out because Symantec sold off their enterprise security solutions to Broadcom. So we see, again, that consolidation in the market, but Microsoft is certainly in that leader space for endpoint protection platforms. In the CASB area, again, Microsoft Cloud App Security is in that leader Magic Quadrant with McAfee, Netscope, BitGlass, also in that range. But again, the difference here, we're talking about an integrated best-in-class suite of products, which at least Gartner is regarding as best-in-class. Then there's the very kind of crowded identity as a service solution. Of course, Okta being far and ahead the leader in that space. But for many customers, Microsoft customers who are already leveraging Office 365 as their productivity suite, they have Azure Active Directory as well. And so one thing you may want to ask yourself is, if you are federating with a third-party identity solution, is to take a look at Azure Active Directory and what it can bring in terms of reducing that friction, improving the user experience, and still being able to provide that functionality that others in that space can provide. And again, with everything being tied in the back end on the Microsoft Graph, there's an increase or better solution in terms of the security that it can provide. This is an area that we may not think of too often. That was information archiving, but again, Microsoft is regarded as a leader there. And finally, in the unified endpoint management with Endpoint Manager, formerly known as Intune, Microsoft is again found itself in that leader quadrant. So we see from the way at least not only Gartner, but also 451 Research and Forrester and Kupinger-Cole have also recognized Microsoft as a best-in-class provider for these various solutions. Kind of starts to make sense that organizations may want to start thinking about consolidating security solutions on that platform, and they can be confident that they are selecting an integrated best-in-class solution. The Microsoft Security Stack, these native capabilities provide simplicity. Again, we talked about some of the benefits: fewer vendors and products to manage, less end-user friction, lower integration costs, and reduced blind spots. And here's an example of some of the financial benefits. So, according to the total impact, this is from a total impact, total economic impact study that was conducted by Forrester. They looked at the market and some of the best-in-class solutions that are out there, and what you can typically be looking to pay for per user. So between a cloud access security broker at $6 per user per month, email protection at $5 per user per month, et cetera, and so on, you could be looking at $30 per user per month for these other solutions. Now, the assumption here is that the customer with an existing Microsoft 365 E3 deployment for $12 in addition, as an add-on, there's an E5 security add-on to Microsoft 365 E3. You're looking at potentially 60% savings by consolidating to Microsoft 365 E5 security. So that certainly is compelling when you look at, again, not only the financial aspects of it, but also the tighter integrations that you're going to get in using the Microsoft best-in-class integrated solutions. Outside of the 365 E5, another area that should be considered too is when it comes to the savings in the SIEM solution, or security information and events or management tools. So many organizations today have a SIEM that's typically on-premise, and from our conversations that we've had with customers, I know in one particular area that I've worked with in healthcare, an on-premise SIEM solution, it was just based on the security analysts who had to try to use the tool to try to correlate events and incidents that occurred in their environment. It was either just too complex and often legacy and requiring a lot of infrastructure, at least from a storage perspective, to maintain. Now in 2020, with the global pandemic, of course, these on-prem systems and tools have represented major challenges for a lot of organizations. And so organizations are taking the time now, and some have done so rapidly, and some are starting to make the transition to cloud workloads. So it makes sense to start looking at a cloud native SIEM like Azure Sentinel. And the benefits here, of course, is if you're a Microsoft Office 365 and Azure AD customer already, there's the free ingestion of that data into Azure Sentinel. There's no additional infrastructure costs, and the two models that Microsoft has from a pricing standpoint is you pay for only what you use. Of course, it's a flexible model with no annual commitments as well. And there could be a potential of $66,000 savings by moving to a cloud-native SIEM. And again, for customers that are already Microsoft 365 users, they can start ingesting those Office 365 logs and Azure AD logs into Sentinel today. Another benefit was when it comes to your cloud security posture management. So cloud security posture management is essentially allowing you to see the health of your Azure, or rather infrastructure as a service deployment. Now, if you're using Azure as your IaaS provider within the Security Center, the Microsoft Security Center, you're getting this at no additional cost. The ability to continuously monitor and protect across all your cloud resources is built in, and this is a complement to Azure Sentinel in that it provides capabilities to assess and provide recommendations to improve security of your cloud resources. And if you are in an environment that's heterogeneous, using AWS or Google Cloud Platform as well, there's the ability to tie in to those clouds and have Azure Security Center provide that cloud security posture management for those environments as well. Of course, that comes at an extra cost, but at the free tier, and if you're just using Azure as your solution, you get a lot of these security hygiene tools and recommendations at no additional cost. So in sum, from the financial aspect of the benefits moving to a consolidated environment using Microsoft 365 security, these numbers were taken from, again, the total economic impact study that Forrester ran for Microsoft, and it was based on a 20,000 employee organization. So in this scenario, that organization was able to reduce licensing costs by $4.3 million. IT admin and deployment savings, so deploying with, for instance, utilizing Microsoft Fast Track was helped reduce costs by $1.3 million. Integration efficiency saved $126,000, and the lower costs of support for third-party solutions was reduced by $150,000. So the potential annual savings in this scenario came out to be $5.9 million. So certainly a compelling reason to take a closer look at the consolidating on the Microsoft security stack. So that was the first area. We'll move into our second area of the benefits of consolidation, and that's providing and delivering a seamless end user experience and achieving greater security. Bottom line is, of course, this year, and really it didn't start this year. I think it accelerated this year with the pandemic, but we've been helping organizations make their move to the cloud and their digital transformation for the past 4 years at least. And so we've seen this shift more to remote work. We've been talking about zero trust for a little while as well, even before this year. So it's not new, but of course, this year has accelerated the need to widen these efforts. And the fact is that when employees struggle with access or making progress on their work, that can translate into higher risk for an organization, because employees are going to find alternate tools and methods for getting the work done. And we've seen this, the entire CASB vertical came about to try to discover that shadow IT, because users were just trying to get around the controls that IT was putting in place, because they just needed to do their work. And so they were, anybody with a credit card was out there signing up for subscriptions for things like cloud storage providers like Dropbox or Box, or collaboration tools like Slack. And they were going outside of the control that IT was trying to put in place, but all they wanted to do was get their jobs done. And this presents a challenge because according to the Verizon 2020 Data Breach Investigation Report, 80% of breaches involve the use of lost or stolen passwords. 60% of bring your own devices are not being secured by IT, and 34% of all data breaches are caused by insider threats. So certainly something that has to be corrected in the environment. When you deliver a seamless end user experience with Microsoft integrated and built-in approach, you can help deliver these frictionless user experiences for users and secure all facets of your employees' daily experiences. And we're going to take a look at how that's done. So a typical day in the life of a user. We see that users are still reusing passwords, at least 5+ according to a study here conducted by NIST that essentially said that users are reusing passwords, and it's a real danger for users reusing their corporate credentials for personal or on other websites because we know every day it seems there's a new data leak and passwords are ending up on the dark web. And that's how attackers are able to infiltrate environments. 49% of employees prefer to bring their own device. There might have been a time where corporate was handing out the devices and people have perhaps had to use 2 phones. I've been there, I was one of those, but I also did not like carrying 2 phones. I prefer to just have one single device where I could do everything on. And so organizations have seen that trend, and of course there's a cost savings too if you don't have to buy devices for your employees, but are those devices being secured? Additionally, users are accessing upwards anywhere from 35 or more apps on a single day. On average, customers are reporting that they're using 180 different applications. But how many of those applications are being managed by IT? How many are being secured by IT? And how can you keep your employees secure and limit the risks of that shadow IT? And finally, over 72% of employees report they are comfortable in regularly sharing sensitive information with others. Again, if you have SharePoint, now with Teams, and other cloud storage providers, users are able to share information. Do you know where that information is, how it's being shared? For security leaders, that's a great concern because we want to do our best to try to keep that confidential information protected and avoid the risk of data loss. So the first thing you want to focus on is simplifying authentication. And Microsoft 365 can help do that. We talked about self-service password reset. That's one way to do that. Users have to start their day essentially by verifying their user identity in order to be granted access to internal systems and data. And organizations are still, of course, using passwords to accomplish that. Yet those passwords are easily forgotten, and they represent 25% of all help desk costs. Of course, the reason why they're easily forgotten is because we've added complexity rules. So users are, just using the typical. If they're doing, autumn 2020 exclamation mark, they're going to move to winter 2020 exclamation mark when it comes time to change their password. And if they're using more complex passwords than that, without the use of a password manager, then those passwords are going to be very easy for them to forget, and that usually results in a call to the help desk to help them reset that password. So Microsoft 365 is removing that burden by allowing your teams to provide IT admins to set up very simple self-service password reset in the environment. And I've done this with numerous organizations. It's usually one of the first things that I do when helping organizations leverage their investment in Microsoft 365, whether that be E3 or E5. I call it the low-hanging fruit, sort of the gateway drug into using the tools that are available, because it's very simple to set up and results in a quick win. Beyond that, we also have, of course, multi-factor authentication that's built into Azure AD with conditional access and being able to utilize the Microsoft Authenticator. But what you may not know is you can also use other authenticator apps. It doesn't just have to be the Microsoft Authenticator, but it's just important to, at minimum, enable MFA in your environment to help further secure the user's authentication. In fact, by just doing that alone, organizations can reduce the risk of user account compromise by 99%, is a statistic given there. And then, of course, is the next step, next evolution in security, and that's just trying to eliminate passwords altogether in the environment by adopting passwordless authentication methods, such as Windows Hello for Business in your environment. And the Microsoft 365 stack can enable you to do that right out of the box. Next, we'll talk about protecting your data on any device anywhere. So we mentioned how employees like to use their own device, and more personal devices are being brought into the environment. Yet, we face that reality that we need to maintain the same level of secure access no matter what the device, and without adding exorbitant costs to the process. $176,000 is the statistic given for what the average cost is for a mobile security incident. But by utilizing Microsoft Endpoint Manager, now that's the new product name, but it's basically Intune, which has been around for quite some time. But Microsoft Endpoint Manager is the kind of crossroads between what Intune can bring to mobile and cloud-enabled devices like Windows 10 laptops, and also Configuration Manager for organizations still requiring that on-premise and co-managed approach. But whatever the case, with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, organizations are seeing or providing a single place to be able to manage all of these devices and realizing 26% reduction in IT support costs with MEM. Then there's applications. So employees, of course, that are accessing applications, and these could be knowledge workers, these could be frontline workers as well. They need to get access to these applications. Perhaps it's for their benefits, an HR solution, or it's a ticketing solution or other financial reporting solution. They need to access these apps. And so single sign-on, of course, is possible with Azure Active Directory to when I last looked at the Azure App Gallery, I believe it was somewhere near 4,000 apps that are in the gallery. That doesn't mean that those are the only apps, because with Azure AD, you're able to provide single sign-on also to on-premise apps using the Azure App Proxy. But the point is that you can help introduce risk-based policies with Azure Active Directory conditional access to enable secure access to these applications. With conditional access, 97% of high-risk login attempts can automatically be blocked by leveraging, for instance, identity protection, which is part of the E5 SKU. Enabling that E5, that identity protection feature helps reduce that security risk by ensuring that if a user's password has been detected on the dark web, because Microsoft can look at those hashes, the password hashes, and if they're being matched up with a database dump, password database dump that's out there, it can alert the user and require that they change their password at the next login. Or if they detects a login from a known risky location, it can also require, for instance, stepped-up authentication, multi-factor authentication for accessing that application. And finally, in this area, when it comes to protecting sensitive data, that's great that you have, if you went through the steps here, you've enabled some of these self-service tools. You have single sign-on configured. You have conditional access configured, so they're not accessing the information without the security controls. But do we know how they're saving that information? And this is where Microsoft data loss prevention comes in. It's great, again, to secure that information, but if users can easily share it out to other locations and there's no way to track where that information is, then it kind of defeats the purpose. With Microsoft 365, there's built-in information protection for better, safer end-user experiences compared to other tools, perhaps third-party tools that may not integrate with productivity tools like Office, which is no doubt the #1 productivity suite being used in many organizations. As the stat showed before, 70% of users are reporting that they regularly share and are comfortable sharing sensitive information by leveraging Microsoft Information Protection with its data classification functionality and its ability to apply protection using protection templates and information rights management to data assets, even if they share it in a location where they should not. There's greater guarantee that it's not going to fall into the wrong hands because someone happens to get their hands on it who shouldn't. That information will be encrypted and protected using the data loss prevention tools that are built into the Microsoft 365 suite. So to summarize, we want to provide that single sign-on, or Microsoft 365 can help provide that simple sign-on, single sign-on experience for users with or without passwords. You can streamline access to apps and data from any device, whether personal or corporate, and from any location. You want to drive seamless and secured access to any app, whether that be on-premise or in the cloud. And you want to keep your data your sensitive data protected with guardrails to guide your employees and keep it confidential, no matter where it lives or travels. Finally, our third area is we're going to look at reducing cyber risk with integrated best-in-class protection. And before we do that, before we dive into how we can do that, again, we recognize that it's a complex landscape that we all live in now with security. The times have changed, and there's significant pressures on security teams to quickly adapt to the new remote work situation, but also defend against new threats. Now, Microsoft recently conducted a survey of a group of security leaders and professionals, mostly working in large organizations, about their new priorities amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And from their perspective, the #1 priority was made clear, and that's improving threat protection to protect against breaches. Protecting against today's threats is more challenging as employees are working remotely and they're accessing resources, apps, and data. And in some cases, outside of even VPN controls, because many organizations found that their VPN solutions was not able to handle the additional and increased load that's brought about by the remote work situation. But during the pandemic, we've seen quite an uptick in pandemic-themed phishing attempts that are being caught. And of course, no opportunity goes squandered. Even the advanced threat out there, and the threat actors are not going to squander this opportunity to try to exploit users. Where can Microsoft help in this regard? Well, the value proposition here is that with Microsoft security solution, again, you get that integrated approach to security that helps to streamline and strengthen that security posture. Being able to detect and respond faster and more accurately to attacks is important. being able to increase the SecOps efficiency is also something that can these tools powered by AI and automation can bring, and it helps to reduce the number and costs of these breaches. And we're going to get a little granular into how Microsoft Security can detect and respond to attacks while reducing the number of breaches, while also giving your security teams back, getting them time back to work on their most important responsibilities. Before we do that, though, let's take a look at kind of the familiar model and how many organizations are having to manage security complexities today that are manifested. Now, this particular kill chain here may look familiar. It illustrates how a successful phishing attempt works its way through an organization, compromises a user account. That compromised user account is then used to elevate privileges in an organization, which leads to lateral movement within that organization to a more high value asset. And then there's the exfiltration of data, or worse, the entire domain can be compromised. Being able to detect, respond, and successfully remediate an attack like this can be a slow process. And it can take the attention of various security groups within an organization using different tools to try to find the correlation, try to find the thread of how a particular attack occurred. And listed here are some of the more popular security solutions that are required across this attack kill chain. And there's significant orchestration that's required with these solutions working together to ensure that nothing slips through the cracks. So in an example like this, that integration between these solutions often tends to be inconsistent. Some solutions may have APIs that are able to integrate and play nicely with others, while others may not, or maybe just very difficult for them to do so. And so the more point solutions you have across the kill chain, the more inconsistent the sharing of information. And this, of course, just creates delays and a great risk of breach into the environment. Now, the next challenge is how these different security solutions are able to transmit that information to a SIEM that might be in place. We've seen the different solutions sending stronger or weaker signals to that SIEM. Some may be integrated well, some may be able to handle that data. Some are able to provide that correlation, and others just are not able to do it or do it poorly. Again, it's that inconsistency of signal sharing that puts SecOps teams at a disadvantage with these tools. They may not have the most accurate information, which may lead to wasted time at best or a breach in the environment at worst. Now, a different approach is, of course, in this integrated best-in-class solution. So here we line up the Microsoft security capabilities that are working in concert with one another. Of course, because all of these solutions are talking to the same backend, that being the Microsoft Graph API and the Microsoft Security Intelligent Graph. And by using artificial intelligence and automation to automatically detect potential threats while being backed up by the vast scale and insights that the Microsoft Cloud can bring. So in this particular situation, Microsoft Defender, which is the new name for Microsoft Threat Protection that was announced at Ignite just a few weeks ago, but Microsoft Defender is detecting that phishing attempt, and it kicks off an automated investigation that removes that malicious attachment or detonates that URL, that malicious URL, before it can even reach the user's inbox. Defender can then provide integrated email, identity, endpoint, and cloud protection across its various workloads. And it works in concert with the Azure Security Center, which provides that infrastructure protection. So if you have infrastructure in the Azure cloud, Defender is going to work with that Azure Security Center, again, to provide that protection to those resources. So now you're able to ensure that your hardware workloads and clouds are hardened and secure. Consistent and rich signals are shared from Microsoft Defender and the Azure Security Center to Microsoft's cloud-native SIEM, which is Azure Sentinel, as pictured here. And Sentinel is able to provide that visibility across the clouds, integrates with third-party and partner security solutions, and uses automation and AI to streamline security operations and improve threat detection, response, and remediation. And I mentioned it before, for existing Microsoft 365 customers, you're able to, at present, have your Office 365 logs and Azure sign-in logs, as an example, ingested for free within Azure Sentinel, and highly encourage any who fit that criteria to do so. The end result is when you're able to replicate this type of automated threat remediation, it just leads to a better solution. Not being able to replicate that consistently as these threats continue to evolve is not only challenging from today's point solutions perspective, but also expensive to the point of being infeasible. So we're going to take a little deeper dive into the specific capabilities of Microsoft Security across the attack kill chain, starting with Azure Sentinel. So Sentinel, again, as mentioned, is a cloud-native SIEM for intelligent security analytics. Traditional SIEM solutions today have not been able to keep up with the digital changes in the marketplace. We're constantly hearing from customers that they're spending more and more time with deployment and maintenance of a SIEM solution, which leaves them unable to handle the volume of data or match the agility of adversaries. They just lack the ability to do that security orchestration and automation features that are so important these days, with new threats evolving on a daily basis, really you could say on an hourly basis. Azure Sentinel is leveraging advanced artificial intelligence, or AI, to do this. So it gives SecOps teams the ability to be agile and it gives them the ability to identify, detect, and block attacks almost instantaneously. The power of the AI behind Sentinel also helps deliver one of its greater capabilities, which is the ability to correlate signal data across identity, device, apps, data, network, and infrastructure in a way that enables the teams to graduate from that old world view of just responding to alerts and trying to manage those alerts as individual pieces of information to the new world of incident management, where these alerts now can be correlated, rolled up into an incident, and you can see the entire attack kill chain and respond and remediate it accordingly. Other products that focus on alerts and require analysts to manually investigate and correlate them with others, as we know, is overwhelming. And it's tedious work, and it's work that it just really becomes difficult for a human being to do on a consistent basis with consistent and reproducible results. Next up, we'll look at Defender. So I mentioned Microsoft 365 Defender is formerly known as Microsoft Threat Protection. Again, this was announced at Ignite, where the Defender brand now encompasses a number of different products. But we'll see how it provides that cross-domain protection against threats. So with Azure Sentinel, you get next-generation cloud-native SIEM, but of course, more than the SIEM is needed to protect an organization from cyber security threats. You also need the preventative protection measures to be in place. You need the automated detection and response capabilities, and that's where Defender comes in. With Defender, many attacks can be shut down even before they're able to get started. And it does that by providing this holistic visibility and automation across the different workloads that are being deployed in a typical Microsoft 365 environment. As we mentioned, identity, apps, devices, and data. And Microsoft actually conducted a test to test the capabilities of Microsoft Defender. They participated in the test with MITRE ATT&CK in an evaluation to determine how Microsoft 365 Defender would fare against an advanced attack like APT29. If you're unaware, APT29 is an advanced persistent threat linked to Russian intelligence. And so they conducted this simulation and they found that Microsoft 365 Defender was able to provide leading out-of-the-box visibility into the attacker's activities, dramatically reducing manual work for those security operation teams. And this was in contrast to vendor solutions that relied on specific configuration changes that needed to be done. Compared to other participants in that same evaluation, Microsoft 365 Defender had the fewest gaps in visibility, which diminished the attacker's ability to operate undetected, which usually is the MO for an attacker. They want to be undetected, they want to lie in wait, and then spring their trap at a more opportune time. And finally, based on this test, Defender was able to flag more than 80 distinct alerts and used built-in automation to correlate these alerts into only 2 incidents that mirrored the 2 MITRE attack simulations, improving SOC analyst efficiency and reducing attacker dwell time and ability to persist. Now we'll take a closer look at Defender for Office 365 and how it is able to protect against phishing and malware attempts. So when it comes to the kill chain, many of you may know, every attack begins with a malicious email of some sort, whether it be an attachment or URL that's sent in that email that a user either opens, clicks on, and starts the process. So for our purposes, let's imagine that a sophisticated attacker was able to make it past a number of the frontline defenses and down the kill chain, ultimately being blocked by Microsoft Defender for Office 365. And then this was surfaced as an incident within Azure Sentinel. With the trillions of emails, that's trillions of email-based threat signals that Microsoft is consuming each day, Microsoft data scientists have been able to advance the artificial intelligence to further and better block and tackle those malicious emails seamlessly. In fact, last year, 2019, Microsoft technologies in this area were able to successfully identify and block 13.5 billion malicious emails worldwide. And it's not just email, it's not just your exchange online environment, it's also SharePoint, it's OneDrive, it's Teams that also can benefit from Defender for Office 365. And with Defender for Office 365, so this product, previously known as Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, the security teams can create end-user simulations for safely assessing how well people can spot and avoid phishing attempts. And that's something many may not know, that if you have Microsoft 365 E5, there is an attack simulator. You may be using a solution from Cofense, formerly I believe FishMe, which is able to create these campaigns and send out potential phishing emails, or at least look like phishing emails, to educate your users. So if you are using a third party, you may want to take a look at Microsoft built-in attack simulator to further drive that education in your organization, because it does play a very important part in an effective security plan. So in a Forrester study, they found that, and again, this refers back to that total economic impact study on Microsoft Office 365 threat intelligence, that Defender for Office 365 can reduce investigation and remediation time by 89.3%. Endpoint protection is our next area in the Microsoft solution suite that we'll take a look at. So while, as we discussed, nearly all phishing attacks begin with an email, and let's imagine now that attacker has crafted that email with a document that includes a zero-day exploit that makes it past the anti-phishing defenses and into a user's inbox. So from here, we can imagine that the attacker or the user is duped into opening that document and executes that zero-day exploit. At this point in the kill chain, the attacker will try to set up a persistence, establish command and control, and look for a way to further compromise that user's credentials and move laterally into the environment, and looking for ways to elevate their privilege using, for instance, Mimikatz is a tool that's used to find the hashes that are stored on the user's workstation, eventually finding their way to a domain admin credential that they can compromise. Using advanced artificial intelligence against Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, so that's previously known as Defender for Defender Advanced Threat Protection, can detect zero-day exploits like these, and once discovered, it will go to work with its automated capabilities and response features. Defender for Endpoint can provide a complete endpoint security that offers preventative protection, post-breach detection, automated investigation, and response. And what this comes down to and what it means is really a holistic, integrated approach to endpoint security that delivers what 3 or more point solutions or best-of-breed solutions in endpoint security may not be able to deliver. And as a result, organizations get that visibility across pre-breach and post-breach, making them more effective and efficient in their response, saving time and money. 97% of post-breach detections were automatically contained and remediated, according to the total economic impact study that was again conducted by Forrester, eliminating many of the manual tasks that are associated with attack and response. We'll look at identity protection now and see how Azure Active Directory and Defender for Identity, formerly Azure Advanced Threat Protection, are able to protect identities. Protecting identities is especially difficult, and it's more important at this time with people working remotely. Identity, as we know, we've said it over and over again, is the new control plane. And if an attacker is able to gain access to a user's account, or worse, a privileged user account, the attacker can move laterally within the corporate resources. So Azure Active Directory allows you to take control of your user's identities, enabling powerful protections like multi-factor authentication, conditional access that ensures secure access and protects against common threats like impossible travel, as an example. Access controls play a big role now, with many employees using personal devices to remotely access corporate data and resources. So upon login, Azure Active Directory is able to assess whether the device is compliant to access these resources. Of course, if you're using Endpoint Manager to do that, it's native integration. But if you're using a third-party MDM tool, there are potentially some integration points there as well to allow that level of access control. With Defender for Identity, so Defender for Identity, one of the components is the ability to look at your on-premise Active Directory environment and ensure that that lateral movement is being restricted, and things like DNS reconnaissance, pass the hash, golden ticket attacks are being discovered. So Defender for Identity is able to monitor user behavior and activities, and can identify that suspicious behavior. And of course, this is known as technique detection and behavioral analytics. And if there is a threat that's detected, Defender for Identity is able to provide a view to clear attack information on a simple timeline for fast triage. You might see it in the picture here. I'll zoom in on it, but this is just a look at what that timeline looks like in Defender for Identity, where it's able to show you the evolution of that attack kill chain. With Azure Active Directory, Defender for Identity, and Defender for Endpoint all working together, it provides the greatest level of identity protection. Customers who use risk policies, using identity protection as an example, have 96% less compromise, according to some internal security research data conducted by Microsoft. And finally, we'll look at Microsoft Security Cloud App Security, because across that kill chain is the ability to exfiltrate that data. So imagine that bad actor gaining access to your customer data in Salesforce, as an example. Today, most organizations are relying on cloud-based apps and services. Much of the data that we store lives in the cloud, in these other applications. And so the question is, how do you get a handle on the usage of cloud resources and at the same time protect all of those cloud resources? Cloud security is now a critical component of end-to-end security strategies, and that's where Microsoft Cloud App Security comes in as part of the Microsoft Security suite of products, because it's able to provide that insight into how the data is being accessed and where it's being potentially stored. Cloud App Security natively integrates with leading Microsoft solutions. It's designed with security professionals in mind and provides simple deployment, centralized management, and innovative automation capabilities. It's able to identify cloud apps and services used by your organizations. That's from the discovery phase of the implementation, where you're able to set up log collectors from your firewalls and your proxies to see which applications your users are using within the environment. Are they using sanctioned applications, unsanctioned applications, and helps you understand, classify, and protect exposure of sensitive information at rest, or leverage out-of-the-box policies and automated processes to apply these controls in real time across all of your cloud applications. It's also able to detect unusual behavior across cloud apps to identify ransomware, compromised users, or rogue applications, analyze high-risk usage, and remediate automatically to limit the risk to your organization. And it does this not just for Office 365 or Microsoft application, but there are a number of products that have native APIs. AWS is one, ServiceNow, Salesforce, Google's G Suite, to name a few, are applications that Cloud App Security can provide that insight to. It's also able to assess if your cloud apps meet relevant compliance requirements, including regulatory compliance and industry standards. And it prevents data leaks to non-compliant apps and limits access to regulated data. Turning back to that Forrester Total Economic Impact Study, 75% of threats automatically eliminated with Microsoft Cloud App Security due to these automated processes. And if you, again, are currently a Microsoft 365 V5 customer and you haven't deployed Cloud App Security, at least for your Office 365 workload, you can do that. It's included for free to be able to do that. Certainly encourage you to look into that, turning that on, or reach out to us and we'd be happy to help. So that concludes the look at each of those components in the Microsoft 365 security stack. We want to encourage you to look at some next steps. There are some accelerated workshops that we as a Microsoft partner are starting to conduct with our customers. So we encourage you to reach out to us directly or to your Microsoft rep to look into a security workshop to learn how Microsoft can help improve your security posture. There's also a total cost of risk report that we can help you compile as well as part of this security workshop that we can conduct that will help you to see where you might be able to realize benefits and cost savings by adopting this consolidated approach across your enterprise with Microsoft 365 security. And I'm going to skip to because I think that's my time. So thank you everybody for your attention, and we look forward to seeing you on our next talk.